Happy Father's Day to all my fathers, to all my soon to be fathers. I wanted to take this opportunity to share a very personal story with you guys. And I smirk out of discomfort because this is a story that I haven't told many people. It's a story that I have actively tried to forget. It is it's a story of vulnerability. It's a story that you know I think might surprise some of you. I think this story might surprise some of you. Um, when I was about 8 years old, well, first of all, I grew up with a single mom who struggled to take care of um, me and my two siblings at different times. My mom had various success taking care of us. When when I was 8 years old, my brother was I think 6 or 7. My sister was maybe 13, maybe 13, 12. Um, she kind of couldn't do it anymore, and for one reason or another, I don't want to get into the specifics of that. Um, she lost custody of myself and my siblings. And so my brother went with his dad. We all had different dads. My sister went with her dad, and I went with grandma, and then, well, grandma on one side, then grandma on another side. And then eventually I went to, eventually somehow I found my brother's dad, my little brother's dad. I was with him. And then ultimately, I ended up with my actual dad. I met my biological dad when I was 8 years old. And it was awkward. It was very awkward. It was a huge culture shock. Um, you know, it, it's like meeting a stranger um, who knows you and who you just kind of don't really know how to relate to. You know, I had never, well, I had been calling, the only person I ever called dad was my little brother's father, who had taken care of us, for a couple years before he and my mom, you know, whatever may happen, it didn't work out. Um, and so I didn't even know how to address him. I for a couple years I didn't even like address him as anything. Those people you don't know their name, and you just kind of you just start talking. When you say goodbye, you just say bye. When you say hi, you just say hi, what's up. You can't talk to them from across the room because you don't know how to get their attention. You don't know their name. So it was kind of like that situation. Very very awkward. Eventually, I got to call him dad. Um, Something interesting happened when I was 8 years old. So my father and my mom shared custody of me, and you know, and they I don't want to say they hated each other, but they definitely didn't get along the best. They were two very different people. My mom and my dad split up, when I was born. So I never lived in a house with both of them. I never knew, I never seen the two of them in a room together. Not that I could remember. And I'm saying a lot. I never shared this with anybody, so I'll just get right to it. When I was 8 years old, my father moved out of state without without letting my mom or any of my other relatives know my whereabouts. So he essentially kidnapped me, right? If you can call it kidnapping. Can a parent kidnap their child? Kind of. Kind of. Legally, definitely. And we just up and moved. And just like that, I was out of contact with my mom, with my mom's mom, her whole side of the family. I wasn't to contact them. Um, but I had a small notebook with their numbers. I always knew that I could call them, but I also understood that my dad did not want me talking to them. He made it clear that, um, he made that clear, and well, he kind of like hinted at that, um, and 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 my mom wasn't the best of influences. We used to go for visitations. She'd have her cigarettes, she'd be smoking and stuff like that. I vividly remember taking a pack of her cigarettes, and I had rehearsed this with not my dad, but a friend of my dad's. I remember rehearsing this and telling them, how my mom smokes, and I remember him saying, he was like, look, you got to tell your mom, if she loves you, she'll, she'll not smoke. And I remember my dad saying, just like just take them and throw them away. One day, he said that. He was like, take her cigarettes and throw them away. And I vividly remember taking her cigarettes on a visitation once, and her just flipping out, And you guys, if you know anybody who has like an addiction, or you're, struggling with any addictions, you know how that is, especially cigarettes and things like that. Thank God, thank the good Lord, she no longer smokes. She's made a whole, 360 in her life, and shout out to her, man. Happy Father's Day to her for, doing everything, for playing both sides of the dynamic the best that she could. So yeah, we left to a new state, no contact, and for about 5 years, my mom, my grandma, my brother, my sister, they had no idea where I was. And I moved around with my dad. We kind of, we were kind of lower class. We struggled. He eventually married another woman, had another kid, and he always worked off the books because he was, I don't know if he was wanted, or I don't know I don't know if he would have kidnapping I'm assuming he must have kidnapping charges, right? I never really explored and like really thought about the legal repercussions behind that. I know he owed child support though, that's for certain. But yeah, I lived with my dad for 5 years, and just again, complete culture shock. Aside from just not, not being able to contact my mom's side of the family, it was just a whole new world. I had a lot of rules. There were a lot of rules to follow. My dad, military guy, all about discipline, all about principles, and I just got like a crash course on like morals and discipline, and the importance of those things. And up until when I was 13, my dad was away for a few months, and myself rather, and my stepmom got into an argument, and I didn't really, it was getting to a point where we were disagreeing a lot. She couldn't really, she was going through, whatever she was going through with my dad. My dad would go away for work trips, leading up to the end of me finally leaving, which I'm going to tell you, how I, quote unquote, escaped, if you can, if you want to make it dramatic. Long story short, my little sister had went into my room, and she had got a hold of a pair of scissors. And I was out in the living room, And I guess she brought the scissors to my stepmom. No, it wasn't scissors. I think it was a knife. It was a knife. I had bought a knife, and she got a hold of it. It was like a flip knife. You have to press a button and open it, and she couldn't open it. She couldn't open it, but it was something I bought. I thought it was cool. Something I bought from the store. I thought it was cool. And I had a couple of friends who they thought it was cool too. And we're kids. We were just figuring stuff out. And so she gets the knife. My stepmom sees her with it, and she just crashes out on me. She just crashes out on me, and I'm sure there was some build up leading up to it. Crashes out, I told you to, keep this up. If anything would have happened if anything would have happened to my daughter, XYZ. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm gonna go. And so I packed up some stuff. I left the house. I went to a mosque. The mosque that we used to go to. My dad's side of the family is Muslim. Went to the mosque. I knew that would be a safe place for me, and I knew I could borrow a phone there. And I remember grabbing my little book with phone numbers in it that had my grandma's phone number. And when I got to the mosque, I asked to borrow a phone. I need to make a call, and I called my grandma. And I was just, I remember just praying and just wondering if it was the same number. I was just wondering, would they have the same number after all these years? I assumed they would have. And they did. They did. My grandma answered the phone, and I was like, hey, I was like, hey, do you remember me? I was like, this is Amir. Do you remember me? And, she goes, of course I remember you. And, I was like, can you guys, can you come pick me up? I'm at this address. And I gave them the address. I was a couple states over from where they were, and they were like, sit tight. We're going to come get you. And yeah, I think maybe about 3 hours passed. And somebody in the mosque had heard me on the phone, and they called my parent, they called my stepmom or my dad or my stepmom. And, I got on the phone with her. She was upset at me. She was upset. I told her what happened, and, it was what it was. I didn't want to be in that house with her anymore. And she was a good woman. She did the best that she could while my dad was away to take care of me. But I'm a young boy. I got a lot going on. She's trying to raise another kid. She's essentially raising two kids by herself. One of them not hers. And I get that it was tough. I do get that. Especially, she was young. My dad was youngish. Not super young, but like, they're probably like, how old were they actually? If, my dad's 50 now? If my dad's like 50 something now, they were probably like 30 something. They were probably like 30 something. I'm 30 now, and I'm, as immature as I am. But yeah, she was upset. She was like, stay in the mosque, don't go outside. And I'm just like, why are you still bossing me around? Like, she was very bossy at the time. She was very bossy, and I didn't have any plans to go anywhere, anyway. But I waited, 2-3 hours, and my grandparents came and they picked me up. They took me to my apartment where I was at. I picked up some stuff. My stepmom let me in to pick up some stuff. I told her, what it was. She couldn't really do anything at that point. You know what I mean? And yeah, took me back, and I got reunited with my mom and my mom's side. of the family. My dad was upset. I got on a call with my dad. He was upset at the time, and yeah, that that's the story of how I got kidnapped by my dad. So now you guys know, man. Now you guys know something that it's a story that I kind of kept close to home because it's just sensitive, and I guess I feel embarrassed sometimes about it, because I was in such a powerless like state. And then I also feel like, I don't want to I don't want people thinking bad of my parents, right? I want, but they went through struggles, they went through challenges just like everybody else, and they dropped the ball in some areas, and they also did a lot of good in some areas. I always think back on that time, those 5 years with my dad, because I literally learned so much in that 5 year span. Like I said earlier, it was I got a crash course on, discipline and morals, and a lot of those concepts, well, some of those concepts stuck with me and made me the person I am. The kind of, a lot of my mannerisms that I have now were developed during that time. Especially thinking, in terms of just like, my dad was never afraid to be different. He was never afraid to do something, take a risk, think outside the box. He was a thinker. He was a big thinker, and he valued learning a lot of random things. Like he would crush at trivia, and I definitely picked that up from him. Really good in English as well, which is just kind of a random thing. Like he used to take me to the library a lot, and like I'd pick out books, I'd read books, a lot of reading. I started writing stories when I lived with him because I really had nothing to do. I learned how to juggle all types of random things. My English got really good because he'd say a lot of new words that I'd never heard before, and when I'd ask like what they mean, he'd say look them up, like look it up in the dictionary, and I'd be like, I don't know how to spell it. How do you spell it? And he'd just be like, here's the dictionary. So that just led to me reading a bunch of words in there that I didn't intend to go in there to look for, just to find the one word that I was looking for. So yeah, you take the good with the bad, and you just, you make do with it, like everybody in this world has to do. We take the cards that we're dealt, and I just figured since today is Father's Day, I would take this time to share this super personal story with you guys about my dad. Dad, if you're watching, hope you're doing good. Hope you're doing good. I haven't talked to him in a while. It's been a while. I have seen him since this incident. I visited him once, and we spoke on the phone a handful of times. But it's been a few years now since I've been able to get in contact with him. I haven't been able to get in contact with him for a few years. I don't know if he changed his number or what, but yeah, hope he's doing good. And one thing I'll say also is that I had a lot of for an amount of time I had a lot of animosity pent up over my dad because he used to beat me. But I should probably save that for another story. But yeah, I used to get like terrible whoopings from my dad. Terrible whoopings. But yeah, I'll probably save that for another video. I got over the animosity though. I say that to say, and yeah, man, our parents are just people too. Parents are just people too. So happy Father's Day again to all the fathers. Keep doing what you do, man. Just keep trying your best. God gonna make a way for you, man. Trust God. Trust that little voice in your head, that angel on your shoulder. and everything gonna work out. Appreciate y'all, and drop a like if you enjoyed this story. Subscribe to the channel, and let me know if you guys want a part 2, and maybe I'll answer some questions if you guys have any in the comments. All right, later.